Tim, welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. I appreciate your patience. We're a few minutes late. We're going to make up for lost time. This evening, I talk, and you talk back, about Breitling today and the ongoing comeback. We talk about potential future watch icons. Hint, not as many as you think. And I'm sharing your viewer wrist shots, cars and dogs, here on Watches Tonight. Open up a window, keep me streaming, and check out thewatchbox.com, where we have over 3,000 pre-owned and vintage watches visible now. Every style, major brand, complication, metal, and size. Buy, trade, or sell. And if you're looking to do any of the three, reach out to me directly, Mosso at thewatchbox.com. It is the direct purchase and pricing email line for anything you see on our website, social media, or this channel. Let's acknowledge the folks who make the show possible. You guys, viewer wrist shots number 1. Stephen K. Oh my God. With his Vacheron overseas navigating massive puggage while dog sitting. Incredibly, only 3 of these watches dogs are being dog sit. 5 of those pugs are his. Marcus G pairs down the puggage. He's got dogs and wheels. There's not a watch in this photo, but it came from my Tim Mosso Facebook page, of which I'll speak more in a moment. Blake M from carsandbids.com, Doug DeMuro's current project, gets back to watches and wheels with a Porsche 911 Safari from 1984 and an Omega Speedmaster. That is a very sharp-looking pair, and yes, they were auctioned together. Jens F. of Switzerland shares his Patek Philippe 5056 bought from our Watchbox Neuchâtel office. Thank you for trusting our company, and yes, we are live in continental Europe. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your pieces on these pixels. Jumping in real quick to our chat box, Edward Ledden of Sweden, Eddie Landsberg here in the States. We've got Patrick Sue's second, well, technically third, Patrick, but I love you all the same. Joe Tyson, greetings from Apex, North Carolina. We've got Eric Nielsen. We got Danes V. We got Thomas Burnett, Junior Johnson joining in from Michigan. Get Outa is joining, longtime viewer. Turkisher Meister joining from Turkey. VTSV joining from the UK. We got John Watchsmith joining from Yorkshire, UK, a center of cycling in the United Kingdom. Richard Combs from South Florida. Dave Opencar saying hi to our Zin gang, represent. And of course, we've got Miroslav joining from Serbia, staying up late in continental Europe with us. We've got Lindenhurst, we've got El Gusto, saludos, welcome. Mark S. from Brooklyn, Dave B. and Cameron Murdoch from Glasgow. Guys, we've got M. Peters from the Netherlands. Again, I appreciate all you guys who are staying up late or getting up early. That is why we try to always make the show. I have a Facebook announcement because I can't possibly acknowledge all of you in the chat box. There are too many of you and you have too many interesting things to say. I have created a new Facebook group. It's called Talking Time with Tim Mosso. You answer a few questions about watch collecting, what you like, what you think's cool, what you want to buy next, and then you're in. It's the way we can share photos, share wrist shots, share discussion, ask questions, and answer them. This is the community that the chat box unfortunately could never be. And unlike the comments below the video afterwards, you can absolutely post photos and videos. So check me out on Facebook. Again, open up another window, keep me streaming, and check out Talking Time with Tim Mosso. That is my Facebook group. That is our Facebook group. All right, let's talk about Breitling watches in 2020. We've explored this turf before, but much has changed in the economy, in the brand itself, and in perceptions. We're revisiting the topic, and I want to know what you guys think about where Breitling stands right now in the market, for better or for worse over the last 3 years. We can officially say that the honeymoon is over. The new ownership took possession in early 2017. Georges Kern, formerly IWC CEO for 16 years, joined in the summer of 2017. So he's been there for 3 years too. CVC Capital Partners, for those who don't know about this, bought Breitling from the Schneider family, which had owned it since the 70s. CVC is a British-based private equity company. They want to increase the value of their investment and presumably sell. How close are they to a viable sale? That all depends on the fortunes of Breitling as a brand. So let's talk about what works. What is working now at Breitling? And I absolutely want to hear from you. First, what works from Breitling, and then we'll talk about what is not working, because there's still plenty on that front. What works? Solid vintage offerings. These won't be the root of any future icons, but they are crowd pleasers and they do move the metal. In terms of what's been offered so far, there's the reference 806 Navitimer 1959, a great looking piece that is true to size and detail relative to the 806 of 1959. We have the Top Time, which is a lovely and evocative 1960 style no-date chrono. We have the 765 AVI, which was built in 3 editions for modern times. You can get it in steel, you can get it in rose gold, you can get it in platinum. They're all appealing, they're all limited. And of course the Super Ocean 57, the Super Ocean Heritage 57 that launched with 2 fun limited editions, including that one, the 1,000 piece COVID release edition. So the COVID Relief is a really cool watch. All of these have been well received. Every single one of the editions has sold out. That is good because it builds buzz. Breitling has more buzz now than it did at any point in the last 6 years. How do I judge this? Well, guys, you tell me. When I used to post a Breitling on my Watchbox Reviews channel, it would garner considerably less interest than anything from Rolex Omega or even Tag Heuer. In other words, the brand was moribund and you weren't interested. What's changed? Well, there's more interest. These videos now view as well as anything from Omega, better than Tag, and competitive with some brands I would not have expected Breitling to run close. Comparable to Vacheron, comparable to Patek, and every once in a while, these Breitling videos go off on a run and get viewership like Rolex. So you're clearly searching more for Breitling watches, and the search traffic is showing up on my videos. So less John Travolta. This is a catch-all for all bad Breitling advertising in the old days. This ad was sad and old from the moment it was first sold, and I was never buying it. Plus, there's less juvenile advertising. The Dollhouse in Fort Lauderdale is an immortal reference by Motley Crue, along with all the other strip clubs mentioned in Girls, Girls, Girls. It's not the kind of thing I want forced on me when I'm paying $5,000 for a luxury product. When I'm watching, I don't know, a Motley Crue concert, fine. When I'm putting a premium product on my wrist in a boutique, I could do without this. And by logical extension, I'm also going to see less of John Travolta and know that photo was not photoshopped. They really did that. The Professional Collection. These are difference makers. Breitling has watches that you would actually use if you were a professional explorer, hiker, sailor, or aviator. There is no Omega equivalent to the Emergency. There is no Rolex equivalent to any of these watches. And while they're mostly prestige, low-volume pieces for folks who have a very solid idea about what they want or need in a high-end multifunction watch, nevertheless, there's a halo value that these watches cast over the entire Breitling catalog. And again, Omega and Rolex, Tag Heuer and Longines, they're not equipped to go blow for blow with this sort of thing. Even the Omega X and Z33s are impenetrable to use. All of these are fairly intuitive and very handy. They have credibility. Finally, Breitling publishes service costs. And not only do they publish the cost of service, but the service prices are actually quite reasonable. Once you've realized how bad things can get at Lange and Audemars Piguet, you realize just how sweet it is to pay $300 to service a luxury watch. And frankly, every brand should post service costs on their website. They mostly like to take your watch first, give you a service estimate, and then hold you hostage with return fees and estimate costs. Breitling does things the right way. Jumping into the chat box, Andrew M. is joining in. We've got Luis Molina asking me, what are my favorite 3 Royal Oaks? Well, I would say the 15202 pre-2012. I would say the annual calendar, which was a wonderful piece. I want to say it's the 25920. And then also going to... Heck, I got to admit, I love the black ceramic perpetual. That's a fun watch. A silly watch, but a fun watch. Nate B is a fan of massive puggage. We have had quite a few pugs on the channel lately. We've got Enrique C, Jay Bosurf from Adelaide, Australia. We've got Ibrahim Salam joining from Beirut. Godspeed and God bless, man. all of our thoughts are with you right now. And then right here we have Bilal Mahmood joining from Islamabad. Thank you for staying up super late. And then right here we have Enigma, late again, but you know what? I don't mind. He's saying he really digs Breitling. They're built like a tank and customer service is very good in the UK. And you want to know something? That is a difference maker. We have Alexi Simola asking about the t-shirt, and the t-shirt was given to me by Ariel Adams, who periodically sells these things. If you ask me, it looks a little bit too much like a Rolex dial, but then again, that's a matter for his legal department and theirs. I just know it's a lot of fun and it glows in the dark. All right, let's take a look at some of your comments here. We got Ryan D joining from San Jose. We have Edward Ledden asking, have you seen Gordon Murray's new T50 supercar? Yes, I have. The true and proper successor to the original McLaren F1. It's been called the ultimate analog supercar, and I love everything about it. The steering isn't assisted at speed. It's naturally aspirated. It's not all-wheel drive, torque vectoring, blah, blah, blah. And it has the world's highest specific output, Cosworth-built naturally aspirated engine. Single position for the driver. Abreast, you have two passengers. It really is the reincarnation of the McLaren F1, and it weighs like 2,100 pounds. I'm a huge fan of elemental cars, but then again, my love for Pano's Roadsters and C5 Corvette Z06s is well established on this channel. Okay, Ryan Bass saying, I think my Navitimer 806 1959 is a benchmark re-edition in a market flooded with re-editions. I would agree, that is one of the better re-editions of recent years. I think that watch will be well remembered and probably hold its value pretty decently. Viewer wrist shots, let's see what else you got for me. Dylan L. sports a flush travel roll and a breed I've never seen, a Catahoula leopard dog on the road. So this is watches, wheels, and dogs all in one. Guys, you never seek to amaze me. Martin from Hamburg soaks up the sun with his Yima Superman Heritage Blue, an explosive and lovely dial. We have Matt M. and Lucy the dog lighting up the night with a Seiko Monster SRPD 27. I love these watches and dogs and watches and cars shots you send me. Keep them coming. Pablo F. reports from Bali, Indonesia, on an adventure with his two-tone Rolex Submariner as God and Han Wilsdorf intended. That's a really cool shot. Guys, send your wrist shots. Watches and water, watches and dogs, watches and wheels to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your watches on this box. Jumping into the chat box, we have Leon K saying, hi Tim, long time watching, first time joining. Welcome, Leon. We've got David DeTora, we've got Chan Yang, and he's asking me, what do I think about vintage and CPCP Cartier? I love the CPCP collection. For you guys who might not be up on your Cartier, vintage is self-explanatory. Almost all those watches are handmade and exceptional. We're talking pre-Silver Flame, pre-Le Mus de Cartier, you know, before the 1970s. So those are exceptional watches. But CPCP was a special sort of high-end watchmaking for the mechanical watch enthusiast, launched in 1998 and built through 2008. And this was the Collection Privée Cartier Paris. And this is where you saw re-editions of historic greats like the Tank à Guichet. You saw JLC movements, Piaget movements, Gerard Perregaux movements, all exceptional movements in exceptional watches. These are increasingly well regarded. If you want a guaranteed classic and a possible future collectible, I'd say take a look at the CPCP. They are of horological value and great interest, and seriously underrated and underpriced for what they are. So definitely keep an eye out for those. Okay, more Breitling. Now we're talking about what doesn't work. Let's talk a little bit about 2-year warranties on customer calibers. Breitling has 2 tiers of warranty, and I think that's the wrong way to go about it. First, you've got a 2-year warranty for any watch with a Sellita caliber. Then you've got a 5-year warranty for any watch with a Breitling caliber. The problem here, obviously, it shows a different level of respect for spending different amount of money. And at any boutique that's worth its salt, any manufacturer, any retail operation will tell you that you need a non-prejudicial approach to the entry-level customer. Treat him as though he is a king, because that guy might be a millionaire, a billionaire, or simply a guy who will recommend your brand to his friends who may be. In other words, if you're selling a basic time-only watch out of a Breitling boutique and you're giving that guy a 2-year warranty while someone else comes in and buys a Premier B01 and gets 3 more years of warranty, that is not non-prejudicial. That is telling your customers that there are 2 classes. And let me tell you, that system never works out at a luxury retail establishment. It will poison the well. Everyone deserves a 5-year warranty, or everyone deserves a 2-year warranty. 5 years is the standard that Rolex and Omega are establishing. Now, intangibles. Do you really put Breitling on par with Rolex and Omega? During the 2000s, they were on the rise, and it was unarguably the case that Breitling deserved to be mentioned alongside those brands. Today, I have to admit, we are influential amongst our friends. We are the ones who recommend brands, who recommend models. And if we don't think Breitling measures up to those comparables, if we think Breitling is more of an Oris competitor or something you would compare to Tissot or Longines, that is going to hurt broader perception. We're like the car guys. We might not necessarily buy the normal cars that our friends buy, but if I say something along the lines of, you can't consider a Honda CR-V, the RAV4 is far superior. That's going to have a lot of impact on the guy who wants to buy that rank and file car. And it's the same with watches. I don't hear people saying Omega, Breitling, and Rolex are peers in triplicate. I'll also mention that the models don't clearly line up against the opposition. When you browse the Breitling catalog, there are tons of watches that don't have clear equivalents at other brands. And well, a brand manager at Breitling might say, well, that gives us a competitive advantage because they have no answer. The fact is, most people think in terms of product classes, and when they look at a Sub or they look at a Seamaster, they're going to be wondering, what's the Breitling equivalent of that? And they're going to find a lot of stuff like Super Avengers, Avenger Hurricanes, and Premiers that don't line up with Rolex and Omega watches. It's like the Cadillac DTS. For generations, through the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s, Cadillac had a bunch of cars that were difficult to compare to your German 3 Series, 5 Series, and 7 Series. Everyone knows that corresponds to an Audi A4, A6, A8, or it corresponds to a Mercedes C-Class, E-Class, and S-Class. Cadillac was building cars that were the size of an S-Class, but priced like an expensive 3 Series or a discount 5 Series. And that confused the kind of customer who might have an open enough mind to cross-shop Cadillac with the Germans. So if your products don't line up in a way that's intuitive and logical and right for the market, you're going to wind up getting bypassed if you're not the clear market leader already. So there's a problem with a bunch of models in the Breitling catalog, like the Avengers, like the Premiers, like the Aviator 8s, that don't really line up with the established classes. Also, as impressive as the vintage pieces are, and let's face it, the Breitling vintage pieces have been very cool. They're made in editions of 153, 253, 1,000, 2,000, and Breitling is a company that makes 150,000 to 200,000 watches a year, which is, to admit, essentially, while generating buzz, these limited editions are not moving the needle. They're not making Breitling more of a competitor to its peers or growing the volume in a way that's durable and projectable to the average model lines. Once you've sold the 1,959 1959 reference 806 reeditions, that's it, unless you want to dilute the model and make a second run, which is never a good idea. So these vintage pieces are cool, but they're also finite, and the vast majority of stuff, Avengers, Colts, Super Oceans, these are watches that need to sell on their merits, not just because, well, it's the new hot thing, it's limited, and everyone can't have them. Everyone can have the Super Ocean. The question is, Breitling, how do you make everyone want the Super Ocean? Also, still too many huge watches. If you open up Breitling's website, it takes about 3 clicks to find watches that are sized as though it's still 2005, or we're partying like it's 2009. These are watches that are 43, 45, 48, and even 50 millimeters in diameter. And while there might be a niche watch brand that you could build around those kind of sizes, when you're selling 200,000 watches a year, that's not going to drive brand equity or volume growth. These need to be a niche within the catalog. Have one big watch line for the guy who's an old school Schneider family era Breitling fan, the guy who would have bought a Super Avenger 10 years ago, but he doesn't need to have watches in every product class in every collection. And there are still too many watches, period. My perception from looking around the industry is that Breitling watches are still way too available, which means there's an excess, which always hurts sale prices. Breitling's brand is better than it was 3 years ago, but still not where it needs to be. Breitling can control demand to an extent with marketing. Here is demand, here is supply. Right now, you've got a situation like this. Marketing can increase demand a little bit. I'm not going to lie. People are persuadable. But you've also got to lower production, and that's where the discipline part of things comes in. That's hard to do. That's something Rolex does really well. So while Rolex marketing is known well and well regarded in the industry, and it certainly has penetration beyond the watch collector community, Rolex also limits production, which is tough, and it's frustrating. And when you've got private equity ownership as opposed to Rolex being a private foundation, it might be really tough to lower production, but that's probably what Breitling has to do. In terms of brand equity, sale prices, and pre-owned value retention, sometimes less is more. Let's see what you guys are saying. Okay, we have Randy saying he's joining in late, and you know what? I don't mind. You made the live show. I appreciate your time. We've got Joe R. asking, what are your thoughts on the new ball watches released in the last 1 to 2 years? I got to be honest, I like ball watches a lot, not just the ones released in the last 1 to 2 years. There's a new entry in the Roadmaster collection that's really cool. Anti-magnetic, manufacture movement, super style that's going to go the distance. I prefer the steel version, 40 millimeters, rather than the larger bronze version, but the new Roadmaster is absolutely awesome. My ideal watch under $3,000 would be a Ball Engineer 2 Magneto S. It's chock-a-block with features. Ball bracelets across the board, regardless of the collection, feel like they're 5 times as expensive as they are. And they have fun technologies like spring lock, which effectively steels your watch against shock. And I know that's a problem because I see a lot of watches coming in for service that have been shocked and need to be corrected. I know magnetism is a problem because just with the speakers in my laptop, I've repeatedly magnetized my Zinn EZM11. Now, it's not a highly anti-magnetic watch, but the fact that Ball offers many anti-magnetic watches, including with their proprietary Mu metal cases, that's really cool. That's a feature that will immediately come in handy, whether you're the outdoorsman, the engineer, or the fireman, or the crazy adventurer pictured in their ads or not. Look, magnetism, boom, just like that. You're going to use that every day. Ball watches also cost a hell of a lot less than I think they should. It's amazing. I don't even think they have their own. I think they share a building with the Juvenia brand out in Switzerland in La Chaux-de-Fonds. Ball deserves its own building, and frankly, Ball probably deserves more mentions on this show. The watches are great. Do I love their crown protection device? No, I think it's a little bit of a gimmick and fiddly, and I know a whole lot of people are put off by the weird Ball watch logo on the counterweight of the seconds hand. Of all the things to lose sales, Ball, please consider dropping that. Finally, the Tritium Dials are cool, but my feeling about Tritium is that it's the kind of thing your eye needs to adjust to in sustained dark. If you want to just look at your watch a few seconds after the lights go out, you really need Luminova. So while I like the fact that Ball uses Tritium, which is self-activating and doesn't have to be charged by light, I also wish maybe they had Luminova underlays below the Tritium tubes, because some of their watches are a little bit faint if you try to view them just after turning off the light. So that's what I think about Ball. Great stuff across the board and awesome pricing. Read from the chat, you better believe it. Okay, we got Phil saying, Breitling is not impressive. I can't see myself ever buying one. We got Leon Kupperman saying, I agree about the 5-year warranty. Besides, Breitling quality warrants it and they've got nothing to lose. So he's saying they basically make a good product and they're probably not going to have many claims on the warranty. Right here, we've got MCC Le Chinois saying the only Breitling I ever considered briefly was the Montblanc, just too many models. I have to agree with that. They have too many collections. I think we have a picture that I took for this, but they have 8 model lines. I couldn't even fit them on the same screen. That is just too many. Rolex has classic watches and professional watches. That's basically what you need if you're Breitling. Try really hard to get this down to 4 collections. At the very least, let it fit on one screen. I've got to scroll to see all the collections. And right here, we've got Barisha saying, I finally made it to the live stream. Welcome. Chris NYC is saying, turn up our sound. people who are having sound issues, we're going to turn it up a little bit. Sometimes you need to check your computer and also your wireless device if you're listening by Bluetooth. Okay, right here we have Chris saying, hi Tim, picking up on a conversation from last week. Where would you rank Grunefeld watches in regard to honesty of price and finishing? Pretty high. I was mentioning that in terms of price, FP Journe pricing is pretty honest. For example, a platinum watch costs like $3,200, $3,500 more than gold. No one does that. Everyone else would charge $20,000 more for platinum. I also said de Bethune is very honest about how it prices its watches. And I would say Grunefeld is up there, but because the watches are also highly customizable, you can kind of be like Porsche and go a little bit crazy with the options list. But the basic watches, the fact that they will do custom work and the fact that you can get them in base metals and you don't have to pay for white gold or platinum, that's worth a lot. The prices are honest, and for the finishing, these guys execute on stainless steel bridges, not brass, stainless steel. They make really special watches that are acceptably priced, and I would say, since you really are getting a watch made by the brothers themselves, they're worth whatever premium they might charge over the likes of, for example, FP Journe, who has dozens of people working for him. Okay. Let's take a look at what you guys have for me. Matthew M. takes delivery from 2 wait lists, and I'm jealous. Watches and wheels at their best. Tudor Black Bay 58 Navy from 2020 and Tesla Model 3. Let me know, Matt, if you're watching. Is it the performance? We got Alex continuing tonight's onslaught of pugs with his Tudor 1926 taking in some sun in the backyard. We've got Michael B. reaching out from Chicago with 3 of his favorites, and I'm honored to be one in the upper left-hand corner of that screen, mask and all. And we've got Peter D. of Denmark, bolder than I, with his Patek Philippe Aquanaut 5167A while mountain biking. That dude lives comfortably alongside danger. Okay, future watch icons, probably fewer than you expect. I had a user question over the weekend, and a lot of questions about this have come up on our Facebook group, Talking Time with Tim Mosso. So I want to establish that there are very few icons, and there will probably be very few additions to that list in the immediate or long-term future. So let's define icon as it relates to the watch hobby. We're in nerd territory unless Rolex watch is in question. My mom knows the Rolex Submariner. My dad knows the Rolex Daytona. Actually, Dad, if you're watching, you know watches pretty well. I know you're on the Reddit watch pages. But this is the only watch that has any real penetration beyond the watch nerd fraternity. This is pop culture stuff, gen pop fashion. Rolex has that kind of penetration, that transcendence. Almost no other brand does. All of which is to say, stuff we consider to be icons are really only icons to watch collectors and a couple of fashion folks who pay a lot of attention to expensive accessories. The Audemars Royal Oak is in this category. So is the Patek Nautilus. So is the Omega Moonwatch. All of those unarguably belong on the watch nerd fetish list, but I'm also going to say that the JLC Reverso, the Cartier Tank, and the Breitling Navitimer make the cut. There are also many borderline watches. One could argue that the Royal Oak Offshore is an icon. I wouldn't quite go that far. It's definitely well known. The Royal Oak is iconic. The Offshore, I don't know. I can't make that commitment, not yet. But when you hear the term icon applied to watches that are merely the best known watch from a certain brand, watches like the Corum Bubble or the Roger Dubuis Excalibur, I'm sorry, I can't agree that these are iconic designs. They might be the best sellers from their brands, but icon writ large, hell no. And I'm not saying they're not great watches, they're just not iconic. That's a big boon to a brand when you can have an icon. So what will and won't be an icon? Who's going to get that big boon in the future? Well, I have to say first and controversially, I don't think retro watches will be icons. And they trade on your interest in other watches. This is why I don't think they're going to have the same kind of enduring value as the models they reference. They reference watches you'd rather own but can't for reasons of price or access or availability or fragility. There's no basis in iconic reputation when we're talking about something. Oops, have we lost the stream there? There's no basis for a retro watch in the world of icons. And here's the thing. I was asked about the Black Bay. This is a watch that people like, and it was suggested to me that this is already an icon. And also the Bulgari, that's the other one that came up. Are these icons already, or will they be icons? And I'm going to say no. And this is why. Glory fades, and reflected glory fades fastest of all. This is the source of the Black Bay's power. And this is a vintage Tudor Submariner Big Crown 7924. It's the one you really want. I don't hate or dislike this kind of watch. I think they're excellent products. They just aren't on their way to becoming all-timers or immortals. Consider an example from the automotive world, which I often cite. The Mercedes SSK 540 is an icon, and for obvious reasons, and not just the infamous people who drove them in Germany during the 30s. But the Excalibur SS, a car that references almost every line and detail of the original 540 SSK? No, the Excalibur SS is a fun curiosity at your local car show. It's not something that's going to break the bank at a Bonham's auction. So it's the same in the watch world, but let's look at a more recent example. If you'll follow and allow a metaphor, the world needs BMW E92 M3s too. Awesome cars that fall just short of immortality. That was the one that finally gave us the V8 in the M3, and it was worth the wait. Vintage BMW E30 M3s are like those Tudor 7924 Big Crown Submariners from just a moment ago. Unfortunately, the E30 M3s are priced to match, and you can buy a substantial house almost anywhere in the world with low-mile E30 BMW M3 money. Now, if you ask me whether I would rather deal with the fragility of a vintage watch or wear the Black Bay daily, I would probably choose the Black Bay as a daily driver with confidence and satisfaction for the same reasons that I'd rather drive the E92 than the E30. The E92 is going to be a more thrilling drive. It's going to offer more performance, features, reliability, durability, and ultimately probably more satisfaction day to day. But as an icon, no, the E30 is the icon. And this is true for all watches of this type. Let's look back 20 years to the arrival of the Omega Pilot's Watch 1938. It was the first in a 10-piece series known as the Omega Museum Collection. These were lauded and acclaimed at the time, and they remain some of the best vintage re-editions, line for line and detail for detail, that have ever been issued. But here we are now, 10 years after the Omega Museum Collection ended, and who's beating down the door to own those watches? Most of them sit for a while when they're pre-owned. Most of them are considered a bit idiosyncratic and sell only to the type of person who's looking for that specific watch at that moment. They don't have a lot of pop culture penetration, and they rarely pop up on the YouTube watch channels, which cover everything ad nauseum. All of which is to say, the best vintage re-edition watches of the 21st century are mostly unmentioned and forgotten today in the watch community. So I don't count ultra-low boutique brands when I'm thinking about icons, because ultra-low one-man brand watches like the Dufour Simplicity, the Régepi Chronomètre Contemporain, and any R.W. Smith series, I don't consider them iconic because they're considered iconic more for who made them than for what they are. A lot of folks dial covered would not recognize a Dufour Simplicity or an R.W. Smith Series 1. Also, frankly, there are a lot of great independent watches out there that are just as good. Marco Long and Beat Haldeman make equally impressive watches. They just don't have the towering reputation and status of those other guys. So I don't consider individual watchmaker status to be integral to iconic status. Plus, an icon must have endurance, and to be perfectly honest, I don't know how many of these independent brands are going to endure long term or how many will survive. Now, regarding the Bulgari Octo, it's had a great run since the automatic ultra-thin arrived in 2017, but we already have too many variants of this watch, and questions about whether a brand other than AP can ride a single model line for decades at a time without another major hit remain open. Franck Muller, here's an example of how this can go bad. Franck Muller's tonneau cases in the 1990s were a sensation. They were huge for a full decade plus. They ran rampant. Distribution exploded around the world. The watches were mentioned in hip-hop and rap. They appeared at the Grammys. They were watches that were almost as popular in mainstream fashion as they were in the watch world. And it looked like Franck Muller was a brand for the future and for all time, and that tonneau case was going to be an icon. Today, where's Franck Muller? Almost lost. I don't hear anyone talking about them anymore. I don't hear people clamoring to buy them. The kind of buzz they had in the 90s eventually died out. They're not bad watches, but from a branding standpoint and from a model recognition standpoint, no, those are not icons. So when I speak of the Bulgari Octo being too new to truly judge, I'm really talking about things like that. Now, jumping into the box, we have questions. Let's talk a little bit about future icons. Which ones do you think will be future icons? I would love to know, because frankly, I can only come up with a couple that I'm going to mention in a moment, but unprejudiced by my thoughts, I want to hear yours. What are going to be icons? Oh my, we can't get away from the Hodinkee travel clock. You guys are still talking about it. There should be like a business school case study in the Hodinkee travel clock. Look, I like the guys from Hodinkee. I still read Hodinkee and I enjoy it, but it's become a phenomenon for all the wrong reasons. Is it an icon? In its way. Yes, it's getting there. All right. Then right here we have Mark S. saying, Franck Muller fell victim. Oh, you know, that's a good point. That's a good point. Sometimes, but I gotta say, I disagree a little bit. I think Franck Muller ultimately just overplayed its hand. They came back with the same shape, larger and larger and larger, and people just became more and more emotionally distant. The most successful watches were the smallest ones back in the 90s. By the time they were 45 millimeters, they'd lost the plot. Right here, we have a question, are my sunglasses polarized? You better believe they are, and iridium coated. And then right here, we've got Get Out of the John saying Cartier Roadster would be iconic, except for the fact they made 3 for every man, woman, and child on the planet. We have a question, what do you think of the new 40.5 millimeter spring drive GMTs? Anytime Grand Seiko makes a complication that's not the size of a fist, I'm a big fan. I also like the updates to the spring drive caliber for 2020. And then right here, we have John Hu saying Vacheron Constantin American 1921, Eddie Landsberg proposing maybe a Moser Pioneer Perpetual. Not a bad idea. They're certainly gaining traction. I would say Moser's a brand on the rise. Let's see how far it can rise before we start according them iconic status. And then we have a comment from Mark S. Ben Clymer went to Columbia Business School. Fact check me on this, but I think Ben Clymer went to Columbia and got a degree in journalism. You could double check that, but I think that's what he did. I don't think he's a business school graduate. And then right here, Edward Ledden is proposing that perhaps Richard Mille could be a future classic. Another tonneau watch that definitely had a run, and arguably in its more accessible forms like the RM5, the RM10, and the RM11. It's definitely possible, but with a brand that's only 21 years old, I just want to see it endure a bit longer. Some folks were suggesting we recently passed peak Richard Mille in 2017, 18, and 19. If that's the case, I think they probably need to switch things up and think about other designs before they can endure long enough to have an icon. But if the RM11 07 or 0100, whatever they want to call it, in the year 2030 is still just as hot as an RM1103 today, then I would have to say, yeah, RM probably passed that threshold and became an icon. Now, let's talk a little bit about my speculative calls. I frankly think that we can't mention limited editions because they're one and done, and I think an icon needs to be enduring. That's why I'm not talking about the Omega Silver Snoopy 2. I'm not talking about the PAM 382 Bronzo. So what I do think will be icons, the Panerai Luminor. I actually think that some of the earliest 5218 models pre-Vendôme, but broadly any Betterini case, Panerai Luminor, is going to be an icon. It's already got a lot of years under its belt. Since 1993, the Alessandro Betterini designed case that was launched by Panerai Sistemi in 1993, I do think that one is going to be an icon, and I think the original, not the 1950 case, is going to be representative. I would also say that the Omega Gray Side, 1 year later and infinitely better than the 2013 Dark Side, this is a watch with a gray ceramic case finished as though it were steel, a platinum dial, an ice-cold aesthetic, all grayscale, with charismatic lume. How often can you say the lume of a watch is charismatic? I actually think if this sticks around, this has a chance. And finally, the Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter. I don't have a picture of it, but it's the James Bond Seamaster. You already know it. This is a watch that, like the Panerai, has been around in its current form with refinements since 1993. Never in the history of the Omega Seamaster since 1948 has one Seamaster design stuck around for over 25 years. That's a quarter century under its belt. I think that watch will be eternal in Omega's catalog and an icon. Now, if I were to throw a few other names out there, the Longa 1 and the Datograph, possibly a Vacheron Overseas, maybe the Gen 2 Chrono, but the Chrono broadly, and then perhaps the Grand Seiko Snowflake, which, believe it or not, has been around for over 10 years, so it already has a decade under its belt. And I think as long as the dial remains the focal point of the watch and it stays in the catalog, it has a chance. Now, viewer wrist shots. I asked, you answered. Bruno I of Sao Paulo, Brazil, impresses with a blue dial Rolex Oyster Perpetual 36. Power and simplicity. Quentin G of France has an exotic from Slovakian craft artists Molnar Fabri, and it is a piece unique. And hell, he's got a pug of his own in that photo. BW of the UK goes vintage with his 1965 Tudor Royal in 9-carat gold. You do not see 9-carat here in the States. Conrad M reminds us that the Rolex Date 8 remains an imperial and presidential presence in its original 36mm size. And Derek W of Ann Arbor, Michigan takes us home with German steel. His Zinn 556, an American carbon with an American-made, Colorado-built Alchemy carbon fiber road bike. Guys, watches and wheels, watches and dogs are just classic wrist shots. Send them to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com. Remember, Talking Time with Tim Mosso. I will be live every single day on my Facebook group. Find me, join me. We're talking, we're sharing videos, we're sharing wrist shots, and not just on Monday evening. And remember, tmosso@thewatchbox.com if you want to buy, trade, or sell through the people who pay for these pixels. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.